Welcome to the House on Fire podcast. Our aim is to light a fire for Jesus in the homes of those who listen through encouragement and equipping. Let's partner together to advance the gospel in the next generation. I am your host, Lucas Jackson, and I am passionate about seeing more people on fire for Jesus. When you listen to the House on Fire podcast, you'll hear from people you can rub shoulders with every week at Bethel Church, because all of our guests are from our church family. These are people striving to love God, love others, and to serve the world. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on this episode of the podcast, and excited to have Glenn on today. Glenn, thanks for joining us, man.
Good to be here. Excited to be here.
Absolutely, brother. Well, tell us a little about yourself and your family.
Well, I got married late in life. I met Mindy, my wife, through my sister and her church.
Okay.
And it'll come up a little bit later as we talk about failures. But I was in a relationship for almost 7 years.
Okay.
And, that ended up ending not in marriage. And so, was that me?
That's you, brother.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay. So ended that relationship and really didn't want to get involved that much in dating somebody again. And my sister said, "Oh, you've got to meet this girl. She sings and she's great. She's a teacher." And so long story short, Mindy and we met. We had our first date in May. We were engaged 28 days later, married 3 months later.
Oh, my word.
Had our first son 9.5 months later, and we've been going at it and going for it since then. So we've got 4 boys: Connor, Carter, Carson, and Caden. Connor's 20, works full-time for Shields here in Fargo.
Yeah.
Carter's a senior this year, playing baseball for Moorhead. Carson is going to be 16, going to get his license. He plays football and baseball.
Yeah.
And then there's our little spark plug Caden at the end, our 10-year-old. So, when we first named Connor, my wife let me choose the name. And we chose the Connor together.
Okay.
And then our second boy, Carter, she goes, "Well, you can choose that." And I went, "Okay, do we keep it with the C's? Do we not?" Because I came from a family with Greg, Gail, Gretchen, Glenn,
Oh, man.
and then Faith and Heather. I don't know if my mom and dad couldn't figure another G, but so that history of having first names that started each other. So we just went with it, and I mess them up. It's funny. It's a daily occurrence. I'll be looking right at Carter, and I'm going, "Carson, why don't you listen to me?" And he's going, "Because you're calling me Carson, Dad. I'm Carter." So, that's why we don't have a dog. I don't want to get a dog because otherwise it'll be one more name I'm going to have to mix up. But 4 boys. I grew up with 4 sisters and a brother. So I've always said that, don't tell me that God doesn't have a sense of humor, that he'll give me 4 sisters. My brother was the oldest one. So literally I felt like I grew up with just 4 girls in the house, and my dad was gone all during the week as an over-the-road truck driver, and so it was really 4 girls, my mom, and me.
Yeah.
But we love life with 4 boys. Mindy, my wife, homeschools all 4 of the boys, and we live in Moorhead, and love the area, the community, everything about it.
Yeah. Awesome, man. And what do you do for work, Glenn?
So I direct the Upward Sports program,
Yeah.
and Upward Sports is the largest Christian recreational sports league in the world. So they have close to 500,000 kids that play either basketball or volleyball, flag football, baseball, one of those sports. Its mission, Upward's mission, is to promote the discovery of Jesus through sports. So they use sports as a way to draw people into the church.
Yeah.
And it's a great way for churches to connect with family because sports will do that.
Yeah.
So we came up here to Fargo Moorhead because of that. It was growing. The program was to the point where the pastors decided we really need to get somebody here full time to do it. And God just led us. God brought us from Florida, okay, sunny Florida, to Fargo Moorhead. And that was back in 2017. Okay. So run that program full time. I also run a side business of a moving business. My dad, as I stated a little earlier, is an over-the-road, or was the over-the-road truck driver. So that's kind of in my blood.
Yeah.
So I do that on the side, and it funds just some of the ministry shortfalls that we have. It brings income into that. But I love it. Love the variety. I just love not knowing what my day is going to consist of every day.
Yeah, for sure. And if somebody were to, look out for you on campus here on a Sunday morning or something, what service do you and your family normally attend?
Yeah, we usually go to the second service, 1045 service.
Okay. At the Fargo campus here?
Fargo campus. We go out once in a while. Again, I've been in ministry since 1991. I've got a music background. My wife was a music teacher. So we'll go out once in a while and lead worship out at Kindred. That's always fun.
Yeah.
A lot of families out there that we know. But yeah, usually 1045 service, and once in a while we'll go early service. But I like having a little time Sunday morning to sleep in and sip some coffee.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And are you guys a part of a life group, a small group, or just a group of people that are pursuing Christ together?
Yeah, so that was something that is a hard thing for us, just with our schedule.
Yeah. 4 boys.
Because 4 boys, but then with Upward going on, we really can't commit to like once or twice a month or whatever. We have a group of 3 other couples. We just got together with them to celebrate my wife's birthday on Thursday night.
Awesome.
So there's 3 couples that we get together with. It's a little bit off for a couple 3 months while Upward is going on, and then we get together throughout the summer. So it's a great group. We had that down in Florida when we were there. We had that out in Wyoming when we served, and I served as a pastor out there. So that's been a huge part of our life.
Yeah.
And we, again, growing up with young kids, it was just a natural thing for us to gravitate toward families with young kids, and we just would form a small group that way and meet together, and it worked out really well.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, the conversation today we're going to have is don't allow past failures to define who you are in the present. And so how have you allowed past failures to define you, over the years?
Yeah, so this came up, part of Upward. We do a devotion or a teaching of a biblical virtue at every practice and at every game. And one of them was the idea of guilt. And what do you do with guilt? And it was the idea, and it was an object lesson with the rear view mirror. And it's like, you've ever noticed in a car how the rear view mirror is, it's maybe 9-10 inches long and maybe 2 or 3 inches high.
Yeah.
The size of that rear view mirror compared to your windshield.
Yeah.
And just that visual idea of let's concentrate on what's ahead of you, not worrying so much about what's behind you. And so that was kind of the truth. But, as a 50-plus-year-old guy, a lot of failures in my life. And when I knew we were going to come together and talk a little bit about this, there's been about 4 or 5 major failures in my life that have really taught me and shaped me into who I am and what I do, even now. And most of them focus on ministry and failures in that. I entered full-time ministry at the age of 25, single guy, and I just made a lot of mistakes. But the failures, some of them, the biggest ones, happened to be when I was a school administrator. I was a Christian school administrator, and we were going through some hard times. That was back in 2008, 2009, when the economy was tanking, and people were losing their jobs. And, obviously when they look at their budget, they say, okay, well, what can we do to cut our costs? Well, how about private education, right? Here's this big chunk of money that we're paying to go to private school. How about if we just, pull our kids and go to public and save all of that? So that was a hard, whether it was my fault or not, that was a failure by the time we left, the school ended up having to fold and close. And the church had moved and bought this old school building and built a worship center onto it. But the whole purpose of it was to, have this Christian school. And so then on my watch and on my clock, it closed. And so that was a hard thing for me, and trying to realize about what I did wrong, or God, what are you trying to teach me? And I think what really got me on that one is I was just trying to do way too many things. We were having to cut staff, and we were having to do different things, and I was covering for this and covering for that. I mean, I was cleaning toilets at night just because we couldn't afford custodians and all this kind of stuff that took me off of why God had put me there to lead that school and to teach these students in a godly way. And so that was a huge part of failure for me. As I shared on a personal level, dated a girl for 7 years, and ups and downs of all of that, desired to marry her, at least I thought. But for one reason or not, many other reasons, it did not happen.
Yeah.
And a painful thing going, God, what did I just spend 7 years doing? What do I have out of it? And looking back on it, it just happened to be a time that if I would have met Mindy, my wife now, during one of those 7 years that I was dating this other girl, she wasn't ready. She was dealing with some physical type of issues and having to do things, and she just wouldn't have been ready. So I look back at that and say, God, you were keeping me in a relationship with a girl for 7 years that you knew wasn't going to end in marriage, but you were saving me for your perfect time to meet Mindy when I was 32 and she was 30. So that's an awesome look back on we make plans and God laughs, because it's like, I got plans for you, for I know the plan that I have for you, declares the Lord. And so that was a really a turning point in my life. And then we served out in ministry out in Wyoming, the least populated state in America, where there's more antelope than people.
Hey, that's not a bad thing.
No, it's not. No, it was great, and our kids loved it. Our boys loved it. Riding horses and catching trout in mountain streams. It was great. But there was a time when we were going through some changes. The church was growing, and there was just some things that I handled wrong with people and a relationship that I didn't focus on with some of the other staff, and found myself really alienated from the other people, and ended up leaving that ministry and going to Florida. Right after that, the senior pastor, who we kind of butted heads with, he ended up leaving a few months later. And it's like, well, if I would have known he was going to go, I probably would have stayed, and we could have healed this and moved forward. But looking back, God then brought us to Florida, where I was able to really heal for a long time. My brother was is a senior pastor there. It allowed us just to go and to be healed with all the hurt and the stuff that happened back in Wyoming. And then that's where I was introduced to Upward. And then that in turn brought us up here. So looking back on these failures about where they brought us and how painful they were, incredibly painful, losing sleep. I mean, I can take you right to a spot. It was a little a river under a bridge, but there was a little gravel driveway, and I would just go and I would sit there for hours because I just didn't want to be in the church office. There was just so much going on, and I would sit there for hours and saying, God, what are you doing? What do you have for me? And just really trying to figure out what God was going to do and when he was going to do it. So that's still, when we drive by there, we go back and visit. I look at that place all the time and just realize what God and how that's really where I met God in those dark, dark days.
Yeah. And how did you, what was it where, these things have happened and, are you carrying the burden of those for a few decades down the road? I mean, obviously you don't forget that stuff, right, and it defines us for good or bad.
Right.
There's some pros that come out of
Right.
things like this. And so was it where in many ways this kind of defined you, or even in your mind, maybe you didn't communicate that way to the people, but just inwardly, like what was that like?
Yeah, I think back to dating the girl for 7 years, part of the relationship, the issue of the relationship was a very strong mom. Her mother was very strong and controlling. And so what happened was when we broke up and then I met Mindy, I was so, that was such a huge part of my past relationship that I shut Mindy's mom off, even to the point, not that I didn't let her plan the wedding, but I made very, very sure that this wedding was going to be what Mindy wanted, not what her mom wanted. See, that was just a carryover
For sure.
from that past relationship. And so there, I feel horrible now because I love my mother-in-law and she's not like what I thought she was.
Yeah.
But, it's painful for me to realize that I took from my mother-in-law the days of all the joys of planning a wedding with her only daughter, and I shut that off because of the past relationship. And so I just that's very clear to me how when you don't deal with things and when you don't really grasp it, how it can have a very negative effect. And that's hard for me even today to realize, man, I messed that up.
Yeah.
I did. But
how long did it take for you to recognize that?
Yeah.
Because I could easily see that happening, or, and even looking back on failures in my life, but I don't recognize that stuff for years down the road.
Yeah. I went through a lot of self-analysis after, I just wasted 7 years of my life. This was before I met Mindy. There's about 4 or 5 months in between the breakup and my first date with Mindy. So that was just this idea of what in the world happened to me? What did you choose, and how did I choose, and what are you trying to teach me through all of this in those 4 months?
Yeah.
But the guilt of just questioning, because I wanted to be married. I came from a big family, going to all these family gatherings, and I've got nieces and nephews, and I'm the best uncle, and I'm drive away going, yeah, I'm a great uncle, but I could really be a great dad too. God, what are you doing? I'm 30 years old, and I'm in ministry. I really need someone alongside me to help, a helpmate. And, but little did I know, just a few months down the road, God was going to bring Mindy into my life, and the rest is history there. But, I look back and try to be really, I'm not an analytical person, but I'm always sitting there going, okay, what went wrong? What went right? What can I do better now in the next situation or the next relationship? God, what are you trying to teach me?
Yeah.
So I don't do it again.
Yeah. Have you ever had a follow-up conversation with your mother-in-law about that?
Yeah, not personally.
Okay.
I mean, it's been in a group type of setting, and there was an apology toward the end as I got to know her. Not the end, but the end of planning for the wedding. That
Gotcha.
I just realized, boy, she's an awesome woman, and I finally kind of let it down and let her be a part of the last months of planning the wedding. But man, to start out with, I was going to control. I wasn't going to let this mother control me.
Yes, sir. Yes,
but we've
sir.
got a great relationship now. She calls me her favorite son-in-law because I am her only son-in-law.
Yeah.
So it's easy for her to say that. But we've got a great relationship, and I think she understood what was going on in my heart and my mind at that time.
Yeah, no, for sure. What are some scripture passages that have really helped you the most when it comes to, looking back on past failures or things that you wish you would have done differently? And so what are some of those passages that have really helped you navigate that, process that? Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I just start thinking about, the Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, the trust in the Lord with all your heart, to lean not to your own understanding, to all your ways acknowledge him. And so, to just trust him and say, God, I don't know what you're doing. I'm gonna trust you. And it's easy to do that now. I'm if I'm honest, I wasn't doing it right away.
Yeah.
When something painful happens, or when, the relationship didn't end the way that or ended not the way I wanted, it wasn't okay, God. I'm gonna trust you. And it took time, and I think that's my biggest learning point out of this is that it's going to take time. It's not like just a decision you can make to say, okay, I'm gonna move on now, and I've learned from this and move on. But that was a big verse for me. And then again, Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Good plans that will prosper you. And it's, don't get into this idea that, this prosperity gospel kind of thing. No, it was just that I just know and knew that I knew his plan for me was perfect. Mine wasn't. And that I needed to lean on that. I had a quote in the front page of my Bible, the very first day I got it, my first day of college, and it said, "Never doubt in the dark what God told you in the light." So this idea that, sleepless nights, which is when really Satan can get you, right? And can just start messing with your mind.
Yeah.
Never doubt in the dark what God showed you or what God told you in the light. So God, you told me that you have plans that are good for me and that are going to cause me to prosper. That's what you're telling me. And I need to remember that at night when Satan can have a hold on you at those times. But that's 2 or 3 big verses, 2 verses and a quote. My life verse has always been Romans 1:16, for I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God to salvation to everyone. So this idea that I'm not ashamed and I'm not a perfect person, one thing I like to live by, and both here with Upward and all of the times I've been in ministry, I'm here to serve, not to please. And this idea that I'm not going to please everybody, and that kills me. I'm a people pleaser, right? I want to please people. I want to meet people's needs. And when I don't do that, that's hard for me. It's hard for me when, people don't even have to ask me. Maybe they're just sharing about something that's going on. And immediately my mindset is, okay, how can I meet that need, right? I think you're a lot like that, Lucas, in Start Time, right? We're just always trying to meet people's needs. And that at times can just put an incredible burden on us as men, because it's happened in our marriage. And this was something that was still something that we really work on, is I'll come home and I'll just be exhausted, right? And I'll just be exhausted. Mindy's trying to take care of the kids, keep the kids quiet or whatever, or make dinner. And then I'll just be so exhausted. But then somebody will call and it's like a switch inside me. It's like, oh, you need me to come? Okay, I'll be right there. And all of a sudden she watches me transformed from this person that was utterly exhausted to, man, I'm full. I'm jumping in the truck and I'm going here to help this or help this person or whatever it be. But this idea that I just desire to serve people and to, try to meet needs all the time. And that can really lead to failure in other relationships. And it can be a huge stumbling block in my marriage, which it has been. And I've had to be really aware of.
Yeah, I have that in common with you, Glenn. I'm the same. The way you described it is like to a T. And my wife a few times in our marriage has said, you will bend over backwards for the world and the matter of a few seconds. Yeah. But you won't do that for our family.
And it's really, it's this idea of meeting people's needs, which is what is at the heart of why I love being and have been in ministry since, 20 some years. I just love meeting the needs of people and realize that. And maybe they don't even know they need it, but I do. And I want to, and I want to help them. And so that is what has made my ministry and the shepherding part of the pastorate very effective, because I just desire to meet and help people. And that's going to draw them both to me, but have an opportunity for me to draw them closer to Christ.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And, it makes me think, just the question in my mind, is it possible to live a life and have 0 failures? And I think to myself, I don't think that's possible.
No.
Even as a non-believer, can you live a life and have 0 failures? Absolutely not. Even as a believer who loves the Lord and trying to live for Christ, is it possible to to honor the Lord in every way we possibly can and to have no failures.
Um,
And it's just not.
Yeah, and how are you going to learn without the failures, right? Think of an athlete. Think about, how am I going to learn to truly catch the ball or run the ball unless I realize, I can't catch it like this because this is a terrible way. You get better simply by failing and then making that correction. But yeah, I don't, man, I'd be shocked to find anybody that would say that they haven't failed. I mean, it's like, okay, just ask the person closest to them. If they're not going to admit what their failure is, ask their girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, whatever. They'll tell you.
Yes, sir.
They'll tell you.
And you've talked a little bit about it, but how have you seen, kind of focusing on your passive failures, how have you seen that affect your marriage and even your family? Your time as a dad, and let's lean in a little bit with that.
Yeah, going back to what I shared before, again, as a pastor, which I've been for 20 plus years, it's never a 9-to-5 job, right?
Yeah.
You know that. It's not Monday through Friday, or, pastors only work one day a week on Sundays. That's it. You're one call away, and I can't let my calls go to voicemail. That's just can't do it. I gotta answer them, right? And so this idea that I'm always willing and able to meet the needs of people in the church or around me, but am I really looking and aware of the needs of my family, my wife? And my wife is kind of person that's not going to inconvenience you. Mm-hmm. She's going to want to please and serve me, no matter the consequence. So I've had to really try hard, and I've learned after 21 years of marriage that sometimes the best thing I can do, and I really try to do it now, is just to sit and listen. She'll be cleaning up or doing something in the kitchen. I'll just come and sit at the table and just talk and have those times together.
Yeah.
Because I'm a night person. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not a night person. She is. And so by about 9:00, I am, I'm down, right? And so we don't have that time at night to focus on our day or whatever. And, when I'm bright and early at 6 a.m., she's not. So we have to really work on that. We were really good back in Wyoming, where we tried to have prayer time together and as a family at lunchtime. Because that was the one time we found that we were pretty much together as a homeschool family. Yeah. Evenings got to be crazy with sports and with meetings for me at the church. And we tried to really to make that a priority. And that was good. That was something to look forward to. But I've learned, obviously I know what my failures are. My wife knows what my failures are. I know what hers are. And so, you learn and try to be very sensitive about making sure that you don't say the wrong thing or approach things the wrong way, because that, my wife doesn't need to be told that she did something wrong. She knows it, right? And so I don't need to sit there and tell her and hash that out. But a lot of times I just got to shut up, right? Mm-hmm. I just got to listen and not give advice. That's the man thing that we always try to do. We try to give advice, but I've tried to be really a listener. But the failures of the past and ministry, I struggle with it when I don't feel like I've met the needs of someone, or if I've failed somebody. We have a gentleman right now, and he's down here for school, and I was really looking forward to having a good relationship with him and getting to be close to him and maybe bring him closer to Christ, because he was a little bit away from that, and it's not happening. And that's hard for me. I want to please his parents, because his parents are hoping that I can bring him back and really draw him to closer to Christ, and it's not happening. And so this idea that I'm failing, but I'm just not reaching him the way that I thought I would and that they had all hoped. So that's something that a failure that's currently going on. But you get two boys, one boy that's Connor that's getting married in April, and you can look and you can say, man, we should have done this or could have done this, or we moved countless times, right? We
Yeah.
spent the majority of our life in Minnesota, and then we moved to Wyoming, and then in Florida, and then up here to Fargo, and then, to Moorhead. So the failure of just uprooting my family because of ministry changes, that's hard.
Yeah.
Connor, our oldest, was a great football player, but because of where we moved, he never got to be a part of a team. I really never got to go all the way through the football program because he was always getting uprooted and moving.
Yeah.
And we're experiencing that now with our second and third one, but they've been here Moorhead all the way now for the last 6 years. And that's just something that Connor never got.
Yeah.
But it was just where God was taking us. And I still look back and his perfect timing. We are where we are. And we joke about, where would you want to go? Would you want to go back to live in Minnesota? Down in the Twin Cities where we were? Would you want to go to Wyoming again? Would you want to go to Florida? Or do you like it here? And, we just look back and just say, well, if we wouldn't have been here, Connor wouldn't have met his fiance, right? Wouldn't have done that. And, we just look back and say how God brought us to each of those points. But all of us would say, we wouldn't go back. We want to be here.
Yeah.
And we love it here.
So would you say that, despite the failures, frustrations, and all the things that have come throughout your lifetime, if you had the ability to take it away, would you take away the pain or the failures that you've had?
Yeah, selfishly, I would say I'd love to not have the pain, but I wouldn't be here today.
Yeah.
Without that. Without those failures. So, looking back, it drew Mindy and I together as a couple. It strengthened my relationship with my brother because he was a phone call away and could talk with him. It strengthened my relationship with my in-laws because my father-in-law was a lay pastor, but we would bounce things off. And I go, man, I just feel like I'm failing here. He goes, Glenn, you're not. And so that was affirming. So there's a lot of this stuff that, I wish away the pain.
For sure.
But without the failure and the sharpening that took place, I wouldn't be who I am and where I am today.
Yeah, for sure. What would you say to somebody who is having a hard time letting go of past hurt and failure, and they're really letting that define who they are? What encouragement or wisdom would you say to that person?
There's that simple statement of let go and let God, and that's so easy to say, right? It preaches well, as we say.
Yes,
sir. That preaches well. But this idea that trying to let go. One of the biggest things that I did through specifically the church, it was a split literally out in Wyoming, and the pastor's leaving, and it was a bad situation. But I had kept all of the emails and the correspondence when things were going pear-shaped and going south. And I just looked at those and go, why? Why do I keep that stuff? Why do I even reread that? So I went through and erased all those because I'll just be searching for something and I'll click and something will match with an email from before, and I'll read it and going, oh man. And then all of a sudden the guilt. So for me, the biggest thing is just trying to get rid of everything that connected you with that failure. Right. And, not to say relationships and shutting the doors on relationship, but just to get rid of things like that and to realize that because it did, the passage that just, to get everything off us that so easily entangles us, right? Because Satan can use that. One word, one, situation, one phrase of an email that someone said that hurt me, man, it just opens the flood doors.
Yeah.
And so, trying to release that and trying to, again, back to that visual thing of the rear view mirror and the windshield, let's focus on what's ahead of us, not what's behind us. God's got amazing things in front of us. But if we choose and if we let ourselves, whatever those trigger points, and believe me, we all have the trigger points. We know what will bring us back to that failure. Get rid of it, whatever it might be. For me, like I said, it was the chain of all the emails and the texts back and forth. And once I got rid of that, I found myself not getting entangled, when I'm working and have the hurt and the pain come back as soon as I see even someone's name, right? I knew what that email was about. So having that gone was a huge thing for me.
Yeah, for sure. Is it really a problem to allow past failures to define us? I mean, is it really a big deal? Because maybe there's a lot of people I think that would allow things to define them, and they kind of, it's almost like it's a pet, that you've had your whole life, and so I just was processing like, is it really that big of a deal to deal with the guilt and frustration of past failures?
Yeah, I think the key thing you said, Lucas, is to let it define us, and we cannot let it define us, right? Yeah. I mean, we all have fallen short, right? All of us.
Yeah.
And this idea that we're going to let it define us. No. Will it shape us? It is who we are, right? Every failure we have is something that is a part of us, but not to define me. I am not a failure. I am not somebody that is impatient or unkind, which are things that have come in the past, in past situations. That's not who I am.
Yeah.
But not to define me, but to realize it is always going to be a part of you. Mm-hmm. And again, you can. I love that verse, right? That talks about to put away what so easily entangles us, right? So it's there. It's always going to be there, but just avoid it. Don't, if I see a rope in the middle of the road, I'm going to avoid it, right? Because I don't want to get all tangled up. And so the sin that can so easily entangle us, the guilt and the shame that comes with all of our failures, if we choose to allow it to entangle us, it will. But it always will be a part of us, and it should be that we'll always look back, and I know that every time I, approach a situation, I'm going to approach it differently because of past mistakes and failures. Does it define me? No, but it is something that's going to cause me to be more refined going forward when I face that situation.
Yeah. What have been some hacks that have helped you the most in dealing with past failures, or maybe even the creeping up of past failures that you need to deal with?
Yeah, and so much of it is just to just cry out right away. And I have great times of driving. I missed that out in Wyoming. I had a 35-minute drive into church every day. We lived way out on a ranch for a long time, and just I know when it's coming. We know. Right? We know when it's starting to filter up and just come in and say, Lord, I need you to take it away. I need you to release this, fill me with thoughts of your love and your plan for me, and just recognizing it. And now it's just thinking I can just push it down. The other hack, like I mentioned, about getting rid of old emails and anything that's going to cause, and trigger that. And I've actually, again, some people, going back to Wyoming, people that I've got great friendships still with, I've asked them, what, let's not talk about that. When you and I talk about our times and whatever, let's not talk about this or that or this person that's going to trigger it for me. And so, when you have that kind of mutual understanding, it goes a long, long way, and you can form an awesome friendship. And you don't, it's like, when you're in a conversation with someone and you're going, okay, is it going to come up? Is it not? Are they going to bring it up? Or, and when it's not going to, right?
Oh, man, yeah.
Oh, the freedom to enjoy that and to just enjoy that relationship, because you're not getting ready for, the topic or whatever that might come.
Well, then every time you think of that person, if you're with them or not, I'm like, oh, then I think of that scenario.
Right.
And then if I'm physically with them, then I'm like, that's what I'm thinking about the whole time. And it's a distraction.
Yeah. And you're always worried about, what the person thinks. And it's, you read way into what they say or what they don't say or what they do. If you let somebody down, okay, are they, do they like me? Do they not? Do they want to be, my friend or whatever? You're always worried and being way, way too, looking into it way too deep because you're so worried about the acceptance of that person or whatever it might be.
Yeah, it's like we create a narrative that probably doesn't exist.
Exactly.
And it can really mess with our minds like crazy doing that.
It can, and I think that it just shuts off so much of what that relationship with that person could be because we're not free, we're not back and forth, we're just always have our guard up, which it's a self-protection kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I also think another hack is to try to create relationships that aren't affiliated or aren't connected to whatever it might be. That's what's been great about here is that nobody knows what happened in Wyoming or Minneapolis or whatever.
Yeah.
And so there's great freedom in that. But yet you also have to be careful that you don't just start other relationships because you don't want to deal, maybe with your past failure. You just try to move on from, different communities where people aren't going to know your past failures.
For sure. No, absolutely. I that's well said. I think oftentimes we can use other relationships to try to cope when we really need to take the time to repent, ask for forgiveness, mend relationships as best we can, and don't carry that around with you the rest of your life. You know?
Yeah, and it is. And just to realize, not let we talked about before, not let it to define you.
Yeah.
But it is going to shape who you are.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yeah.
It is. I hope. I mean, I would hope that. I mean, I with my boys. I mean, there's been incredible times they've let me down, and yet, I will never ever use that to show control or whatever. But it's always going to be there.
Yeah.
But yet, my love for them is unconditional in the same way that Christ's love for us is totally unconditional. And so we don't have to worry about trying to please each other. But I just think that there's ways, and we know them, ways to make sure that you don't get sucked back in or get entangled once again with the sin or the feeling or the whatever, the shame, the guilt of past failures. And I try to be a positive person, and it's like, okay, well, this maybe didn't go the way I wanted, but so be it. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Don't think, oh man, I just failed again. What did I do wrong again this time? No, it is what it is. One of the great guys that I served under, sometimes things always don't work well for people in ministry. We had an issue with a secretary of mine, and we didn't work well together. And I just felt so guilty going, how can I not work? She's a great, and he just came and said, hey, sometimes it just doesn't happen. I mean, sometimes it doesn't work. Let's just realize it. And we've got a great relationship now, but that relationship, pastor and secretary, just wasn't a good fit. And that's fine.
Yeah.
But I just remember he came in and said, don't expect everything to always be peaches, even in ministry and between Christians, it's not going to work. Just move on, so don't let it, again, come down on you all the time, and just say, okay, Lord, what's ahead of me now, right? What's ahead of me?
Yeah, for sure. How do we know if something is really a failure? I've been thinking about this a little bit, and because, I think there's a lot of things in my life that I'd be like, that's a failure, that's a failure, that's a failure. Now, if I genuinely make a mistake, well, then there's a failure component to that.
Right.
But I often think like things that I thought were serious and large failures then, and looking back, I'm like, okay, I don't think it was as big of a failure as I thought it was.
Right.
And so how do we know if something is really a failure or not? And
Yeah, especially when your failure involves being let down by somebody or you letting someone down. When you're in the midst of that, the guilt and the shame and the weight of that is just incredible, right? And again, that kind of goes back to, where Satan can really get to us at night when we're, trying to fall asleep and just the guilt that can come. But this idea about the failures and realizing that we're all going to fail, right? All of us. But the true idea is that it's never as bad as you think it is, right? I mean, you can look back on everything. I mean, even as a sports fan, we got a terrible team, right? On Mondays after we're big Viking fans, that's one of the highlights of our week. All of us get together, boys come back, we watch Viking. Monday, we're just such a terrible team. We stink, And then by time Thursday and Friday, you know what? We're okay. We can win on Sunday. It's never as bad. Usually, never as bad as you think of it, and it's raw. That's what happens with failure. It's raw right away. And I've learned too, is when you deal with people that are like that. I have a story. One of my cousins went to college and he took off down and he was going to surprise his girlfriend at her college. And he showed up and she was with another guy. And he called me and he goes, "Glenn, I don't trust myself. I don't want to drive. Come down and get me." Okay, this is back to the story like, okay, I'm going to go. Now, I was single at the time, so it was like 1:45 in the morning. It was a 3.5 hour drive. I drove all the way down there, picked him up. He was sitting on the curb, and he just goes, opens his door, he goes, "Don't you dare tell me that everything is going to work out for good. Don't tell me that." He was so raw of the failure of what he felt. I mean, he'd been sitting on that curb for 3.5 hours thinking about all the things that he did wrong. But when you fail, or when someone fails you, it's raw. Yeah. And just like any wound that we have, just give it time, and try to assess it. But from the person that is trying to minister to that person, if you're trying to work with someone that's dealing with that shame of failure, just give them time, but just being in your presence. Don't feel like you have to answer everything, right? Us men think that all the time. We got to fix it. No. I've just learned to just shut my mouth and listen when somebody is in that stage of just being raw after they've failed or someone has failed them, because it will get better.
Yeah, for sure. For those listening and they're thinking about you and your family, how can they be praying for you guys?
Yeah, this is such a unique transition time for us. I don't feel like I'm old enough to be giving away my son or having my son get married, but I guess I am. But, Connor went and he only dated one girl and he's marrying her. And so our second son has really only had one serious girlfriend, but now he is going to go play baseball down at Augustana College. And we've never gone through that. So this new phase of our life is in trying to deal with, he's going to be gone for 4 years. What's that going to be? My boys have always been around and we've been apart. And so the transition that awaits us is hard. Yeah. Son's going to get married and he might move away and my other son's going to be gone for 4 months or 4 years. Our lives are going to change. Yeah. And so I used to be able to have them. They would come and they always were a part of Upward and played. And then when they got too old, then they were referees for me. They were always a part of Upward ministry, and now they're getting old, so older. Yeah. So that isn't the way it used to be. And I look back and say, I wish I would have known how good it was back in the good old days when it was the good old days, right? Yes, and so the transition of that, and just again, I don't know what Melissa's like, but Mindy and I are just so different, you know. And I'm just an impulsive decision. You want to do it? Let's go. Okay, you want to do this? Let's do it. Where she needs, process and time to think. And that's always going to be an issue in our marriage, to where we just, as we make major decisions, and whether it's colleges or all these different things for our boys, how we as a couple decide. Mindy's the kind of person that she doesn't need to always have it be her way. She just needs to be heard. Yeah. And I just, again, need to just listen and have the time. I'm always running high RPMs, right? Yes, and I just got to slow down and listen and try to be a helpful husband. But, just in ministry where you're always trying to please people, Upward is a successful numerically up here with 1,000 people, kids playing, but that's also, many more people that are probably going to get upset or mad or think I'm doing something wrong. It's more people to, prefer to get mad at me in a sense. But I'm here to serve, not to please.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the House on Fire podcast. Our prayer is that this podcast activates your home for Jesus. May the light of Christ burn bright through you and yours. Until next time.